I'm going to analyze this debate by asking three simple questions. First, is prison a good environment for a child? The answer is no. Second, are criminals generally speaking good parents? The answer is also no. And finally, does the policy help rehabilitation? And the answer, as you might have guessed, is also no. So first question, are prisons a good environment for children? Now, right at the beginning of the debate, Team Proposition has come up and told us about this wonderful, secure environment they're going to create that will keep children away from all the worst harms of prisons. Now, right at the beginning of this debate, we questioned whether this is actually possible. My first speaker, Benjamin, told you that 87% of prisoners in the United States of America report some type of physical abuse. And as another statistic, 2 in 5 of them report this on an almost daily basis. We think the systemic failure of prisoners to even look after their own prisoners makes us doubt the validity of a secure environment Team Proposition have created. We haven't heard a response to this. But okay, even if you could create a secure environment, Darian, my second speaker, came up and told you why isolating the child is so terrible for him. Now Ben comes up in his third speech and says, oh, this isn't so bad. So okay, let me paint you a picture of what happens to a child who spends most of his day in prison. You go to school. Can you invite your friends back home? No, because you happen to live in a prison and your father is in jail for assault, for beating up someone else, and most parents don't like their children interacting with these sort of people. You're at home, you want to call your friend over and go out to the coffee shop. You can't, because these things don't exist in prison. We wait for Meet the Parents' Day. Your friend brings in his father, who's a policeman. You bring in your father, who was just arrested by him 2 weeks ago, and is accompanied by a warden wearing an orange jumpsuit and has manacles on his hands and feet. This is the sort of life we are subjecting the child to if you place him behind bars. Every day he comes back to a home that is not warm and familiar, but surrounded by guards and barbed wire. Every day as he sits in his room, he listens to guards trying to break up the prison fights that are taking place in the yard outside his house, even if he can never see it himself. This is the sort of environment you're going to be subjecting a child to. So yes, maybe children can spend time with their friends in school. What happens after that? What happens to every other facet of social interaction we think is so important for a child? They never heard a response to this. We think this is terrible for a child. So because this debate, as the third speaker admitted, is about who does things best for the child, we think we've taken this on this criteria alone. No, but let's ask the next question anyway. Are prisoners, generally speaking, good parents? And first of all, I'd like to ask what these people are in there for. Now, Singapore is pretty tough on crime, and so is Hong Kong, but we generally don't send people to jail for stealing a pencil from a provision shop. They talk about people who get sentences for 5 to 10 years. You get 5 to 10 years for things like assault, for mugging someone in a dark alley, for corporate fraud, and Ben comes up and tells us that corporal fraud isn't such a bad thing. Really? Stealing $50 billion like Bernie Madoff, that isn't a bad thing? Taking away people's life savings who they've entrusted to you in banks isn't a bad thing? We're not saying all criminals are necessarily evil, but we're saying that criminals have a problem with their values, because if they had good values, they wouldn't have done these crimes to begin with. And we don't want them to pass these values on to their children, because a huge part of parenting is role modeling. And the only values you can teach your children are the values you have yourself. Then they come up and give us this analysis about parental instinct. They say parental instinct is always there, and we conceded this in our second speaker where he talked about loving parents. First response, we didn't concede this. We said we think the vast majority of criminals are bad parents, but even the few good ones aren't going to be worse parents if they wait a while, sir, if they wait a few years before seeing their child again. My second response is that the parental instinct is often based on empathy. And if you can't show empathy to a fellow man because you've just beat him up in the street or taken away all his life savings by committing corporate fraud, we question whether you can have this parental instinct towards a child. Before that, yes, sir.
You really have to stop comparing normal children with children who are already from broken families. Please focus your speech on comparing children from these single-parent families of whom their parents have committed crimes, who have this option and who don't have this option.
Okay, I will compare children of broken families. You recognize that these children are from broken families. And the problem with these children is that they're from broken families because their parents have done things to their wives or their husbands that has made the family break up. Children from broken families need good role models, more than any other children out there. Because children from non-broken families have 2 parents to be good role models for you. Children from broken families only have 1. You're now placing them in the same cell as a person who's in there for assault or for corporate fraud. We agree with you totally. This debate is of people from broken families, but that's why we need to take care of them all the more. Your example simply doesn't stand. Finally, in their third speech, they came up and told us that foster homes are terrible, terrible things. Generalizing most foster homes. First of all, we think as bad as foster parents get, they are not in jail for a reason, and that's because they're law-abiding citizens. So on this grounds alone, we think foster parents have already proven themselves to be far better parents than people living in jail. They gave us the example of BDP, and we'd like to point out that one single example of BDP is a huge failure and a terrible one at that, but it does not compare to the 82% of prisoners we talked about earlier in our first opposition speech who suffer physical abuse at the hands of other inmates. So while not all foster homes are perfect, we have a far higher proportion of getting good foster homes than we get of getting good places in prisons. The final point they gave us on this argument was this example about the developing world. And he said, developing world foster homes are terrible. Our response, they might not be perfect, but developing world prisons are even worse. In developing world prisons, guards can't even control the inmates because they kind of run the prison. They can't control prison riots, and that's when you're going to see children joining prison gangs. That's when you're going to see children being used as hostages in gang fights within prisons. That's when all the abuse we were so worried about will happen on your side of the house. So no, foster homes aren't perfect. We've never claimed that, but they're far better than a father or a mother who happens to be a criminal. No, thank you. The final point was this strange example about interactive rights. They say the justice system can't take away your interactive rights. Yes, but the justice system can say you are a bad parent and we take away your interactive rights because you are a bad parent. All along this debate, they've agreed to us that we take children away from negligent parents, and we suggest that being in jail happens to equate to the fact that you are a negligent parent. So we can take away these interactive rights. On their last point about how we allow husbands and wives to live with each other, so why not parents and children? Darian already came up and told you that one hand, the parent is a caregiver for the child, the father is not a caregiver to his wife. It's two totally different scenarios. Don't mix this up. Alright, let's go on to my third point of contention. Which side of the house does better on rehabilitation? And I'm going to suggest it's my side of the house. Now, Darian came up and told you why this is a terrible thing for rehabilitation. Because it's subjecting the prisoner to sort of psychological and emotional and financial stress of having to raise a child behind bars. Their response was, oh, if you give the prisoner all these responsibilities, he will turn out to be a better person. I've got a few responses to that. First of all, we give the prisoner responsibilities after he's reformed, not before he's reformed. Second of all, even if we accept your argumentation, isn't it better to give him these responsibilities bit by bit rather than all at once? For example, by allowing visitation rights first and then full custodial rights after you come out paroled and come out of jail. We think that our model of graduated access is far better on our side of the house. But even if we accept that their side of the house is better for rehabilitation, they still never answered the most important part of my second speaker's speech, that we just don't believe in using children as a tool for social policy. It doesn't matter if it's better for the parents. This debate isn't about the parent. This debate is about the child. So we don't really care about all your benefits to the parents as long as a single harm comes to the child. Children are not the tools of their parent. When you harm your child, you should take him away from you, and people in jail aren't good role models. So because I've shown you that prison isn't a good environment to raise your child, that parents in jail are bad parents, and that this is bad for rehabilitation, go with our side of the house. Jail time is not child's play.